February 3rd, 2026, 10:47 a.m. A tow truck pulls up to a home in Tucson's Catalina Foothills neighborhood. The driver steps out, walks to the driveway, hooks up a blue Honda CRV. The car belongs to Annie Guthrie, daughter of Nancy Guthrie, the 84-year-old woman who vanished 2 days earlier in the middle of the night. This is the last vehicle Nancy Guthrie ever sat in, the last place she was seen alive before someone took her from her home at 2 a.m. Police load the car onto the flatbed, drive it to the Pima County Sheriff's impound facility, lock it behind a chain-link fence under 24-hour surveillance. That was 33 days ago. The car is still there, still locked away, still tagged as evidence in an active kidnapping investigation. But here's what doesn't make sense. On February 20th, Sheriff Chris Nanos stood in front of cameras and declared the Guthrie family cleared. Not persons of interest, not under suspicion, cleared. He said it again on February 22nd, and again on February 25th. The family had nothing to do with Nancy's disappearance, he told reporters. They are victims. Leave them alone. And yet, as of March 5th, 2026, that blue Honda CRV remains locked in the evidence facility at the Pima County Sheriff's Department. Disassembled, analyzed, processed under a search warrant signed by a judge who agreed there was probable cause to believe that car contained evidence of a crime. 33 days and counting. The sheriff won't explain why, won't say what they're looking for, won't address the contradiction between clearing a family and holding their car as evidence for over a month. So tonight, we're going to walk through what that means, what police can extract from a modern vehicle, what a 33-day retention tells us about the investigation, and why the silence around this car might be the most important detail in the entire case. To understand why this car matters, you need to understand who Annie Guthrie is, and what happened on the last night anyone saw her mother alive. Nancy Guthrie had 3 children. Savannah Guthrie, the co-anchor of NBC's Today Show and one of the most recognizable faces in American media. Cameron Guthrie, an F-16 fighter pilot. And Annie Guthrie, the middle child who lived closest to her mother in Tucson, Arizona. Annie married Tommaso Feliciano. They built a life in Tucson, not far from Nancy's home in the Catalina Foothills. While Savannah's career took her to New York and Cameron's service took him across the country, Annie stayed. She was the daughter who checked in regularly, who had dinner with her mother, who made sure Nancy, at 84 years old with limited mobility and serious medical conditions, was okay. On the evening of Friday, January 31st, 2026, Annie and Tommaso invited Nancy over for dinner. Nancy arrived. They ate together. They talked. It was a normal family evening, the kind of quiet, unremarkable night that happens in families everywhere. Around 9:30 p.m. dinner ended. Nancy needed to go home. Annie and Tommaso offered to drive her. Nancy agreed. They walked out to their car, a blue Honda CRV. Nancy, according to what Annie and Tommaso later told investigators, sat in the front passenger seat. Tommaso drove. Annie sat in the back. They made the short drive from their house to Nancy's home in the Catalina Foothills. Pulled into the driveway. Garage door opened. They helped Nancy out of the car, walked her inside, made sure she was settled, made sure she was safe. Then they left, drove home, went to bed. That was the last time anyone who loved Nancy Guthrie saw her alive. Approximately 4.5 hours later, at 2 a.m. on February 1st, 2026, a masked man appeared on Nancy Guthrie's front porch. Armed, gloved, face covered, he disabled the doorbell camera, opened the door, entered the house. 41 minutes later, Nancy's pacemaker stopped syncing with her iPhone. She was gone. By the time the sun rose on February 1st, Nancy Guthrie had vanished, and the last vehicle she had been inside, the last place she occupied before disappearing into the night, was that blue Honda CRV registered to her daughter Annie. 2 days later, police came for the car. Before we go further into what happened to that car and why it's still sitting in a police evidence facility 33 days later, subscribe to Crime Uncovered right now. We investigate the details that other channels miss, the evidence that doesn't make headlines, the contradictions that reveal what's really happening beneath the surface of high-profile cases. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because understanding how investigations actually work could change how you see every true crime case. On or around February 3rd, 2026, a tow truck arrived at the residence where Annie and Tommaso's blue Honda CRV was parked. The driver hooked it up, loaded it onto the flatbed, drove it to the Pima County Sheriff's Department impound facility. This was not a voluntary surrender. This was not Annie and Tommaso saying, "Here, take our car, we want to help." This was a seizure under legal authority, which means one thing. Police had a search warrant. You cannot just take someone's car because you feel like it. You cannot impound a vehicle as evidence without judicial authorization. The Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution protects people from unreasonable searches and seizures. If police want to take your car, search it, disassemble it, and hold it for weeks or months, they need a judge to agree there is probable cause. Probable cause means more than suspicion. It means a judge reviewed an affidavit written by investigators that laid out specific, articulable facts suggesting that car contains evidence of a crime. So, somewhere in the Pima County court system, there exists a search warrant for Annie and Tommaso's Honda CRV. That warrant was drafted by detectives. It was presented to a judge. The judge read it, evaluated the facts, determined that, yes, there is sufficient reason to believe this vehicle contains evidence relevant to the kidnapping of Nancy Guthrie, and the judge signed it. That signature is not given lightly. Judges understand that authorizing the seizure of someone's vehicle is serious. It deprives them of transportation. It invades their privacy. It signals that law enforcement believes this car is connected to a crime. The warrant would have specified what investigators were looking for. Not just evidence, but specific categories. Digital data from the vehicle's computer system. Biological evidence like DNA, blood, hair, fibers, fingerprints. Trace evidence that could place Nancy Guthrie inside that car after the time Annie and Tommaso said they dropped her off. Once the warrant was signed, police executed it. They took the car. They transported it to a secure facility where chain of custody could be maintained, where no one could access it without authorization, where every person who touched it, every piece of evidence removed from it, every test conducted on it would be documented in meticulous detail. Because if this case ever goes to trial, prosecutors will need to prove that every piece of evidence extracted from that car was handled properly, that nothing was contaminated, that the chain of custody remained intact from the moment the car was seized until the moment that evidence is presented in court. On March 5, 2026, investigative journalist Chris Nanos of the Cold Case Foundation contacted a source inside the Pima County Sheriff's Department. He asked a direct question. Is Annie's car still in evidence? The answer was unequivocal. Yes. Nanos pressed further. Is it on an evidence sheet? Does it have an official evidence number? Yes. Where is it currently? The source explained that the car was out at a repair shop, being reassembled after forensic analysis. Nanos asked which tow company moved it. The company confirmed they had transported the vehicle but said they were under a confidentiality agreement and could not provide details, which tells us something important. This is not a casual hold. This is not police dragging their feet on returning property. This is an active, ongoing forensic examination of a vehicle that investigators believe contains critical evidence in the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. 33 days later, that car has not been released, and the sheriff has not explained why. Modern vehicles are not just transportation. They are rolling computers that record everything. And when investigators seized Annie's car, they weren't just looking for fingerprints. They were after data that could confirm or destroy the story Annie and Tommaso told about what happened that night. Every car manufactured after 2015 has a Telematic system, a computer that logs where you go, how fast you drive, which doors open, even who's sitting in which seat. It's all recorded, all time-stamped, all waiting to be extracted by forensic investigators who know where to look. The GPS alone can rebuild the entire night. Investigators can see exactly where that car went after leaving Annie's house. They can see if it drove straight to Nancy's home like Annie said, or if it made stops she didn't mention. They can see how long it stayed at Nancy's house. They can see where it went afterward. They can verify every detail of the timeline Annie and Tommaso provided, or they can expose discrepancies that create new questions. But GPS is just the beginning. Modern Honda CRVs have weight sensors in every seat. These sensors, originally designed for airbag systems, record how much weight is in each seat and for how long. If Nancy sat in the front passenger seat from Annie's house to Nancy's house, the data will show an elderly woman's weight in that seat for the duration of the drive. But if the sensor shows something different, if it shows that seat was empty or occupied by someone heavier or lighter than Nancy, that creates a problem. A discrepancy between what Annie said happened and what the car recorded. The car also logs which doors opened and when. Front driver door, front passenger door, rear doors. If Annie said they helped Nancy out of the front passenger side, the data should show that door opening at Nancy's house at the time they said they arrived. If it shows something else, investigators need to know why. And then there's Bluetooth. If Nancy's phone connected to the car's system, the car remembers. It stores the device name, the connection time, how long it stayed connected. Investigators can see whose phones were in that car and when. They can cross-reference that data with cell tower records to build a complete picture of who was where and when they were there. All of this data sits inside a small computer module usually located under the dashboard. To access it, investigators remove the entire unit. They take it to a forensic lab. They create a bit-for-bit copy of everything stored inside. They preserve the original. They work from the copy to ensure nothing is altered. That process takes time. According to experts who work these cases, telematics analysis can take weeks. The data has to be extracted carefully. It has to be analyzed by specialists. It has to be compared against witness statements and other evidence to see if everything lines up. And if it doesn't line up, if the car's data contradicts what Annie and Tommaso said, investigators have a decision to make. Do they confront Annie and Tommaso with the discrepancies? Do they wait for more evidence? Do they keep investigating quietly while the family believes they've been cleared? Whatever they found in that telematics data, it was significant enough to justify holding the car for 33 days while waiting for additional analysis or confirmation. Because you don't hold a cleared family's car for over a month unless you have a reason. A reason the sheriff refuses to explain. And remember this, Sheriff Chris Nanos stood in front of cameras on February 20th and told the world the Guthrie family is cleared. Not suspects, not persons of interest, victims who deserve privacy and respect. He said it multiple times. He asked the public to stop speculating about their involvement. He positioned them as innocent people suffering through an unimaginable tragedy. And yet their car, the last place Nancy Guthrie was seen alive, remains locked in a police evidence facility, still being analyzed, still being processed, still tagged with an evidence number that says investigators are not done with it yet. If the family is truly cleared, why hasn't their car been returned? What are investigators still looking for? What did the telematics data show that requires 33 days of additional investigation? The sheriff won't say, and that silence is louder than any statement he's made. But telematics are only part of the story. While computer specialists extract data from the car's electronic systems, forensic technicians are doing something else entirely. They're searching for biological evidence, for DNA, for blood, for any trace that Nancy Guthrie was in that car after Annie and Tommaso said they dropped her off. When the FBI evidence response team or a sheriff's forensic unit processes a vehicle as evidence, they approach it like a crime scene. They photograph everything. They document every stain, every scratch, every item inside. Then they start searching, and they search thoroughly. They swab every surface for DNA, steering wheel, door handles, gear shift, seatbelt buckles. Anywhere human hands touch leaves behind skin cells and sweat. If Nancy's DNA is found in places inconsistent with just riding home from dinner, investigators need to know why it's there. They examine seats with alternative light sources looking for biological fluids invisible to the naked eye. They remove seat covers and check the padding underneath. They vacuum carpets and floor mats, collecting every fiber, every hair, every particle of debris. All of it gets bagged, tagged, and sent to the lab. They inspect the trunk carefully, because if Nancy was transported somewhere against her will, the trunk is where you'd expect to find evidence. They look for blood, even microscopic amounts that luminol can reveal. They look for hair that might have fallen out. They look for any indication that someone was placed back there. They check for signs of cleaning, recent shampooing, disinfectant residue, bleach, any evidence that someone tried to sanitize the interior after the fact. Because people panic, they clean, they try to remove evidence. But forensic science can detect that cleaning occurred and can often find biological material even after aggressive cleaning attempts. All of this takes time. DNA analysis takes weeks. If samples were sent to the lab in early February, results might just now be coming back. And if any of those results show Nancy's DNA in unexpected places, or unknown DNA that needs to be identified, or blood evidence that contradicts the story of a simple ride home from dinner, investigators aren't releasing that car until they understand what they're looking at. Former FBI agent Maureen O'Connell spent 20 years on the FBI's evidence response team processing crime scenes worldwide. She explained on Chris Nanos' panel that processing a vehicle as evidence in a major case can easily take weeks. You don't cut corners. You don't rush. You process everything because you only get one chance to examine that vehicle properly before it goes back to the owners. And you definitely don't release it before all the lab results come back. Because if you release the car and then discover later that there was critical evidence you missed or tests you didn't run, it's too late. You've lost control of the evidence. You've potentially compromised the entire case. So they hold it, and they wait, and they don't explain what they're waiting for. 33 days and counting. That's how long Annie and Tommaso have been without their car. That's how long investigators have been processing it as evidence. That's how long the sheriff has been telling the public the family is cleared while refusing to explain why their vehicle remains in police custody. The contradiction is impossible to ignore. Either the family is cleared and the car should be returned, or there are still investigative questions and the sheriff should not have declared them cleared. Both things cannot be true simultaneously. So which is it? What did investigators find in that car that justifies this extended hold? And why won't anyone in a position of authority address the elephant in the room? On February 20th, 2026, Sheriff Chris Nanos stood in front of cameras and made a statement that reverberated through the true crime community and the Guthrie family's supporters. We have cleared the Guthrie family. They are not suspects. They are not persons of interest. They are victims in this case, and I am asking the public and the media to respect their privacy and leave them alone. He said it again on February 22nd in an interview with local media, and again on February 25th when asked directly whether Annie and Tommaso were under investigation. No, he said. They are cleared. They had nothing to do with Nancy's disappearance. But as of March 5th, 2026, the blue Honda CRV belonging to Annie and Tommaso remains impounded as evidence in the Nancy Guthrie kidnapping investigation. Think about what that means. The sheriff has publicly cleared the family, has told the world they are not suspects, has asked people to stop speculating about their involvement, has positioned them as victims who deserve sympathy and privacy, and yet he has not released their car. The car police seized under a search warrant. The car that has been processed for forensic evidence for over a month. The car that is still sitting in a repair shop being reassembled after investigators took it apart looking for evidence of a crime. These two facts cannot coexist without explanation. Either the family is cleared and the car should be returned, or the car is being held because it contains evidence relevant to an active investigation and the clearing was premature or strategic. Retired police officer Bob Gilliam, who spent 36 years in law enforcement, including extensive time as a detective working major cases, addressed this contradiction directly on McDonough's panel. I don't know how you continue to hold the car if you've already cleared the family, Gilliam said. If you've cleared them, what are you looking for in that car? And if you haven't cleared them, why are you telling the public you have? He pointed out that in his experience, when a prosecutor or a law enforcement agency clears someone, it's because all investigative avenues related to that person have been exhausted, and the evidence definitively rules them out. You don't clear someone and then continue holding their property as evidence. That makes no sense. Unless, Gilliam suggested, the clearing was not about the evidence. It was about the pressure. The Guthrie family, particularly Annie and Tommaso, faced intense scrutiny in the early weeks of the investigation. Online sleuths dissected their every statement. Podcasters questioned their behavior. Social media users accused them of involvement based on nothing more than the fact that they were the last people to see Nancy alive. That pressure was brutal. It was unrelenting. And it was, according to many observers, unfair and potentially harmful to the investigation. If the sheriff came out and said, "The family is cleared," perhaps he was trying to relieve that pressure, to give Annie and Tommaso some breathing room, to redirect public attention away from them and toward finding the actual perpetrator. But if that's what happened, it creates a different problem, because now the public believes the family is not involved. But behind the scenes, investigators are still processing their car, still analyzing data from it, still waiting for lab results that could change the entire trajectory of the case. Former FBI Supervisory Special Agent John Lamb made a critical point during the panel discussion. He said only a prosecutor can truly clear someone, not a sheriff, not a police chief, not even the FBI. Clearing in the legal sense means a prosecutor has reviewed all the evidence and determined there is insufficient basis to charge someone with a crime. Law enforcement can say they're not currently focusing on someone. They can say someone is not a suspect at this time. but definitive clearing is a prosecutorial decision. Lamb said he's seen cases where law enforcement publicly stated someone was cleared, only to arrest that person months later when new evidence emerged. It happens, and when it does, it damages the credibility of the investigation and raises questions about whether the initial clearing was honest or strategic. Attorney and former prosecutor Matt Murphy, who has commented on the Nancy Guthrie case in various media appearances, said the same thing. You cannot clear someone until all evidence has been analyzed, until every investigative lead has been followed, until you are absolutely certain that person had no involvement. If the sheriff cleared the Guthrie family on February 20th, but investigators are still processing Annie's car on March 5th, one of two things is true. Either the clearing was premature and based on incomplete information, or the car is being held for reasons unrelated to Annie and Tommaso's potential involvement. But if the car is being held for reasons unrelated to them, what are those reasons? Is it possible investigators believe someone else used that car? That Nancy was in that car at a time Annie and Tommaso don't know about? That evidence in the car points to an outside perpetrator who had access to the vehicle? Those are the questions the sheriff needs to answer. Because right now, the contradiction between the family is cleared and we're still holding their car as evidence creates more questions than it resolves. And those questions matter. Because in a case where an 84-year-old woman has been missing for over a month, where every day that passes reduces the likelihood of finding her alive, the public deserves transparency. The family deserves transparency. Nancy Guthrie deserves an investigation that follows the evidence wherever it leads without political considerations or public relations strategy clouding the facts. 33 days is a long time to hold a car, long enough that it signals something significant, long enough that silence is no longer acceptable. When Chris McDonough's source inside the Pima County Sheriff's Department said the car was out at a repair shop, that phrase caught the attention of every investigator on the panel. Because repair shop doesn't mean what most people think it means in this context. This is not cosmetic repair. Police are not fixing scratches or replacing a broken taillight so Annie and Tommaso get their car back in pristine condition. This is forensic reassembly. When a vehicle is processed as evidence in a major case, it gets dismantled. Seats are removed to access the frame and check for hidden evidence. Carpets are pulled up to examine the floor panels. Dashboard components are taken apart to extract the Telematics control unit. Door panels are removed to check for items that might have been hidden or that fell into the gaps. The level of disassembly depends on what investigators are looking for, but in a case like this where you're verifying statements and searching for any evidence that Nancy Guthrie was in that car at a time inconsistent with the family's account, they take it apart thoroughly, and when the examination is done, someone has to put it back together. That's what repair shop means. A facility with the tools and expertise to reassemble a vehicle that forensic investigators have dismantled, to reconnect wiring harnesses, to reinstall seats and carpets, to make the car functional again. But here's the important part. Even when the car is at the repair shop, it's still in evidence. It's still under law enforcement control. It's still part of the chain of custody. The repair shop doesn't own it. Annie and Tommaso don't have access to it. It's being reassembled so that when and if investigators decide to release it, it's in drivable condition. The fact that the car is being reassembled 33 days after it was seized tells us the forensic examination is largely complete. Investigators have extracted what they needed. They've sent samples to the lab. They've pulled the data. They've photographed and documented everything. Now they're waiting for lab results, waiting for telematics analysis, waiting for confirmation or contradiction of the statements Annie and Tommaso gave about what happened that night. And while they wait, they're putting the car back together. Because if the results come back and show Annie and Tommaso were truthful, if the evidence supports their account, the car will be released. And it needs to be functional when that happens. But if the results come back and show discrepancies, if the evidence contradicts what Annie and Tommaso said, the car might never be released. It might remain in evidence indefinitely. It might become Exhibit A in a trial. Retired FBI agent Maureen O'Connell pointed out that in some cases, vehicles are held in evidence for years, decades even. She mentioned a homicide case from 1984 where the suspect vehicle, a 1968 Mustang Shelby Cobra, was still in the evidence facility as of 1999, 15 years later, because the case was still open and the vehicle was still evidence. In major cases, you don't release critical evidence just because time has passed. You hold it. You preserve it. Because if the case goes to trial, you need to be able to present that evidence in court exactly as it was when you seized it. The decision to send the car to a repair shop suggests investigators believe there's a reasonable chance it will be released eventually. If they thought the car would be held indefinitely, they might leave it disassembled in the evidence facility. The fact that they're reassembling it suggests they're preparing for the possibility of release. But they haven't released it yet, and that's the key. 33 days later, with the forensic examination apparently complete and the car being reassembled, it's still in police custody, still tagged as evidence, still unavailable to Annie and Tommaso, which means investigators are waiting for something. A lab result, a confirmation, a piece of data that will either support releasing the car or justify holding it even longer. And until that something arrives, the car sits in legal limbo, being fixed but not freed, reassembled but not returned. The silence around what that something might be is deafening. The question everyone wants answered is simple. What did investigators find in that car that justifies holding it for 33 days after the sheriff cleared the family? We don't know. We may never know unless charges are filed or the case goes to trial. But we can make educated guesses based on how these investigations work and what kinds of evidence would warrant this level of scrutiny. What if the telematics data contradicts Annie and Tommaso's statement? If Annie said Nancy sat in the front passenger seat but the weight sensors show that seat was empty or occupied by someone significantly heavier or lighter than Nancy, that's a problem. If Tommaso said they drove straight from their house to Nancy's house but GPS data shows the car made stops they didn't mention, that's a problem. If they said the drive took 15 minutes but the car's log shows it took 30, that's a problem. Any discrepancy between what the car recorded and what Annie and Tommaso said happened creates investigative questions, not necessarily evidence of guilt, but enough to justify holding the car while investigators work through those questions. What if DNA evidence places someone unexpected in the car? If investigators found DNA from an unknown male in the vehicle, particularly in the trunk or in locations inconsistent with normal use, that could indicate someone else was in that vehicle. Maybe someone used the car without Annie and Tommaso's knowledge. Maybe the suspect had access to the car and left biological evidence. DNA analysis takes weeks. If samples were sent to the lab in early February, results might just now be coming back. And if those results show unknown DNA, investigators need time to run it through databases, compare it to evidence from Nancy's house, and determine whose DNA it is. What if there's evidence of cleaning? If the car showed signs of recent aggressive cleaning, particularly in the trunk, or in areas where you wouldn't normally deep clean a vehicle that raises red flags. People don't shampoo their car's trunk for no reason. They don't scrub down the interior with disinfectant unless they're trying to remove something. Chemical analysis can detect cleaning agents, can determine when cleaning occurred, can even find biological evidence in areas that were cleaned if the cleaning wasn't thorough enough. If investigators found evidence that the car was cleaned after January 31st but before it was seized, they'd want to know why. What was being cleaned? What was someone trying to hide? What if trace evidence points to a specific location? If soil, vegetation, or pollen from the car's undercarriage or wheel wells matches a location investigators believe might be connected to Nancy's disappearance, that's significant. It means the car was at a place Annie and Tommaso didn't mention, a place that could be relevant to finding Nancy or understanding what happened to her. Desert soil in Arizona has distinct characteristics depending on the specific region. If the car picked up soil from a remote desert area and that soil doesn't match the route between Annie's house and Nancy's house, investigators need to know why the car was there. What if there's blood evidence? Even microscopic amounts of blood can be detected with luminol and confirmatory tests. If investigators found blood in the car, particularly Nancy's blood, in a location inconsistent with the story that she just rode home from dinner, that changes everything. Blood in the trunk, blood on the floor of the back seat, blood in quantities or patterns that suggest something violent happened. Any of that would justify holding the car indefinitely while investigators determine how it got there and what it means. The fact that the sheriff cleared the family but hasn't released the car suggests the evidence in the car might not directly implicate Annie and Tommaso, but does require further investigation. Maybe it points to an outside perpetrator who had access to the vehicle. Maybe it creates timelines that need to be verified against other evidence. Maybe it raises questions that can be resolved with additional analysis. Or maybe the clearing was strategic. Maybe the sheriff said the family is clear to relieve public pressure while investigators continue working behind the scenes to determine exactly what the evidence in that car tells them. We don't know. But the fact that we don't know, that the sheriff refuses to explain, that 33 days have passed with no transparency and no accountability, is itself significant. Because in a case where an 84-year-old woman is missing and every day matters, silence is not acceptable. Contradictions are not acceptable. The public and the family deserve answers about why that car is still sitting in a repair shop instead of back in Annie and Tommaso's driveway where it belongs if they're truly cleared. On March 5, 2026, investigative journalist Chris Nanos convened a panel of experts to discuss the Nancy Guthrie case. Among them were retired FBI agents, former homicide detectives, and forensic psychologists who have worked hundreds of major cases over their careers. When McDonough revealed that Annie's car was still in evidence 33 days after seizure, the panel's reaction was immediate. This is not normal. This is not routine. This means something. Retired FBI agent Maureen O'Connell, who spent 2 decades on the FBI's evidence response team processing crime scenes across the country, said holding a car for 33 days signals one of 2 things. Either investigators found something significant and are waiting for confirmatory analysis, or they're being extraordinarily cautious because they don't want to release evidence prematurely and then discover later they needed it. In a case like this, O'Connell explained, where the car belongs to family members who were the last to see the victim alive, you don't take any chances. You process everything. You wait for every lab result. You verify every statement. And you don't release that car until you're absolutely certain you're done with it. She explained that telematics analysis alone can take weeks. The data has to be extracted from the vehicle's computer system. It has to be analyzed by specialists who understand automotive systems. It has to be cross-referenced against cell phone records, surveillance footage, and witness statements. If any of that data creates questions, investigators need time to resolve those questions before releasing the vehicle. Former homicide detective John Lamb, who worked cases in Virginia for over 3 decades, pointed out that the existence of a search warrant is itself significant. A judge reviewed an affidavit and agreed there was probable cause to believe the car contained evidence of a crime. You don't get a warrant for a victim's car just because you want to check something, Lamb said. You get a warrant because you have specific reasons to believe that car is connected to what happened, and those reasons have to be articulated in the affidavit. Lamb said he's worked cases where vehicles were held as evidence for months, even years, because they were critical to the prosecution. He mentioned a 1984 homicide where the suspect vehicle was still in the evidence facility 15 years later because the case remained open and the car remained evidence. If this car is still being held 33 days later, Lamb said, it's because it's important. It contains something investigators need, or it answered questions that created new questions that need to be resolved. Retired police officer Bob Gilliam, who spent 36 years in law enforcement, including time as an undersheriff, focused on the contradiction between clearing the family and holding their car. I've said this before and I'll say it again, Gilliam stated. I don't understand how you can clear someone and continue holding their property as evidence. Those 2 things don't align. Either they're clear and the car should be returned, or there are still questions and you shouldn't be telling the public they're cleared. Gilliam suggested the clearing might have been politically motivated rather than evidence-based. The family was under intense scrutiny. Social media was brutal. Maybe the sheriff decided to relieve that pressure by declaring them cleared, even though the investigation was still ongoing. But if that's what happened, Gilliam said, it's a problem. Because now you've told the public the family isn't involved, but you're still investigating them. That damages credibility. That creates confusion. And it makes it harder to prosecute anyone, including outside perpetrators, because defense attorneys will use that contradiction to argue law enforcement didn't know what they were doing. Forensic psychologist Dr. Gary Picotto pointed out that the length of time the car has been held suggests investigators are taking this very seriously. They're not cutting corners. They're not rushing to close the case. They're following the evidence methodically, even if that means holding property for weeks while waiting for results. That's what you want in an investigation like this, Doctor, Picotto said. You want investigators who are thorough, who don't make assumptions, who wait for the science to tell them what happened rather than jumping to conclusions based on hunches or public pressure. But he also noted that transparency matters. The public doesn't need to know every detail of the investigation. But they deserve some explanation for why a family that's been publicly cleared is still having their car held as evidence over a month after it was seized. The panel unanimously agreed on one point. The sheriff needs to address this, needs to explain the contradiction, needs to provide some transparency about what they're looking for in that car and why it's still in custody. Because right now, the silence is creating more questions than answers. And in a case where Nancy Guthrie has been missing for over a month, questions without answers are unacceptable. March 6, 2026, day 34 of Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. An 84-year-old woman vanished from her home in the middle of the night. She was taken by someone who disabled her doorbell camera, entered her house, and removed her so carefully that neighbors heard nothing. No screams, no struggle, no sound at all. Oh. The last place Nancy Guthrie occupied before that night was a blue Honda CRV, her daughter's car, the vehicle that drove her home from dinner, that pulled into her garage, that her family used to make sure she got inside safely. 2 days later, police seized that car, loaded it onto a tow truck, took it to an impound facility, executed a search warrant signed by a judge who agreed there was probable cause to believe it contained evidence of a crime. 33 days later, that car remains in police custody, disassembled, analyzed, processed for forensic evidence, now being reassembled at a repair shop but still tagged as evidence, still unavailable to its owners. And the sheriff who cleared those owners publicly, who told the world they had nothing to do with Nancy's disappearance, refuses to explain why their car is still sitting in a police facility instead of in their driveway. This is the contradiction at the heart of the Nancy Guthrie investigation. A family declared clear while their property remains evidence. A sheriff who asks for trust while providing no transparency. A car that has been held for over a month with no public explanation of what investigators are looking for or what they found. We don't know what telematics data from that car revealed. We don't know what forensic analysis showed. We don't know if DNA evidence created new leads or contradicted statements or pointed towards suspects we haven't heard about. We don't know because we haven't been told, and we deserve to be told. Not every detail, not information that could compromise the investigation, but enough to understand why a car belonging to people who have been publicly cleared is being treated as critical evidence in an active kidnapping investigation. 33 days is not a routine hold. 33 days is not just being thorough. 33 days is waiting for something. Lab results, confirmatory analysis, a piece of data that will either definitively clear the family or definitively implicate someone else. And until that something arrives, the car sits. The family waits. The public speculates. And Nancy Guthrie remains missing. If you have information about Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI or the Pima County Sheriff's Department at 520-351-4900. A combined reward of over $1.2 million is available for information leading to Nancy's recovery. Subscribe to Crime Uncovered for updates as this investigation continues. Hit that notification bell and share this video, because somewhere out there, someone knows what happened to Nancy Guthrie. And every share, every view, every conversation about this case increases the chance that person will come forward. Nancy Guthrie deserves answers. Her family deserves answers. And that blue Honda CRV sitting in a repair shop after 33 days in police custody might hold the key to finding them. The question is, what will that key unlock? And why won't the sheriff tell us?